This is lesson number 2 on effective listening. And you may have come in, and we're going to get more into some of the practical do this, don't do that later on in the study. But I think to set a foundation for those practical things, I think that there are some things that we need to better understand about ourselves and about others. And one of those areas is understanding the human heart. And I can tell you from comments that people have made, both inside the church and outside the church, that a lot of people do not understand the human heart. What God says about the human heart. Okay? So, I want us to get started by considering this. Sometimes we hear phrases like, it's the heart of the matter, or we've got to get to the heart of it, or I just don't have my heart in it. What comes to mind when you hear the word heart? What comes to mind? Say that again. Tender. Okay, why tender? Okay, so tender hearts can be easily hurt. Very good. Someone else, what comes to mind when you hear the word hurt? Passion. Heart. Excuse me. Passion. Passion. What do you mean?
A joyful thing.
Okay. There's
Motivation.
all right. So there's an energy, a passion that oftentimes is associated with the heart. What else?
Core.
The center.
Core, center. Why do you say that?
The source of the entire body. It's where everything originates from. Goes out to feed everything else.
Okay, so it's the origin of a lot of things, and we're going to see Scripture supports that idea in just a minute. Someone else,
Love,
why do you say love?
because that's what you feel. That to me, that's what heart is how you love.
Okay, so love is also, or the heart and love are often associated because love is where it is coming from the heart.
You love
Okay.
a child, you love a friend, you love a spouse, you love your friends.
Very good.
I think of God. I just think God.
Why?
God. Because He's so everything. And the heart is God. He loves more than we can even comprehend.
And so would it be good to say, I would love for God to dwell in my heart?
Yes. Big time.
Okay. How do you think understanding the heart can help with listening? How can understanding, not just your heart, but understanding other people's hearts, understanding both your heart and the heart of others, how do you think that could help with listening?
It gives you a sense of where they're coming from, how their mind works.
Okay, by knowing their heart, you know them a little more deeply. You know how their mind works. It's not just a guessing game. You know something more significant about them.
Play really into the understanding,
Okay.
not just hearing, but understanding what they're saying.
Yeah, and the class is about effective listening, but here's the reality. Why are we listening? Why are we listening?
We care. We care.
We care. We want to understand. And we want to understand so that we can communicate effectively and have relationship. Okay? So many relationships never have a chance to develop because the depth of understanding never takes place. And so that's what we want to help facilitate. So I want you to respond to a quote. This is Robert Jewett. He said, a characteristic of the heart as the center of man is its inherent openness to outside impulses, its directionality, its propensity to give itself to a master and live towards some desired goal. React to that. What do you think about that statement? What does it mean, first of all?
I think that's part of the problem with the whole subject. Is the word is thrown around to do so many different things. And, you know, I already had one psychology class in my life that I had to take in education. And they said there's the affective domain and there's the cognitive domain. Well, supposedly it's one of them is more feelings and the other is more actually thinking like a rational person. And that's not that good in comparison either. And so we throw all kinds of terms around when we use the word. It's not your four-chamber muscle that pumps your blood. We know that. And so most of our reactions are blood pressure variations and butterflies that come from all that. So it's just a hodgepodge of stuff in there. And that's the reason we've all got good things to offer. And we've already said 7 or 8 of them. We're still just beating around the bush.
Well, and here you're talking about the confusion that's created. Even if you went to certain experts today and you threw out the word heart to them, they might use the word heart in their discussions with one another, and each of them have a different idea of what heart means. So remember, we're going to be operating from Dale's perspective, okay? Well, Dale's the teacher, and so that's the prerogative of the teacher. So remember last week what we equated the heart to? What it was that we equated the heart to?
Child.
Right, the child, the little boy, the little girl within each of us. Okay. Now, what do we know about little children that has to do with this quote?
They are impulsive.
All right.
You can be open.
They're often impulsive. They can be open. Here's the part I want to really hone in on tonight, and that is the outside impulses. In other words, the heart can be easily swayed, and not always in a good direction. Okay? Not always in a good direction. That's why it's so important for the heart, as we will see in some verses, that the heart is taught and trained properly, just like a little child. Okay?
Isn't that what trial and tribulations do for us?
They certainly are intended to train our hearts. It's this thing.
So say we often hear the phrase, follow your heart. But that really is not a biblical concept at all. But you'll probably read it. The Bible says somewhere it's deceptive.
We are going to read that tonight. And you're exactly right. We talked about last week how Hollywood urges us to follow the heart. And that's not necessarily good advice. Okay? So the heart can be influenced in ways, but it needs to be trained just like a little child needs to be trained. So let's read some verses and talk briefly about what they mean so we can see what the biblical perspective about heart is. Proverbs 4:23. Somebody read that. You can read it from the screen. You can read it from your phone. You can read it from your Bible. What does it say?
Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
I'm so glad you read that, Moray. Moray in our band of brothers is always diligent and faithful to remind us to pray, to have pure hearts. Okay, maybe we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So he says, guard your heart because it determines the course of your life. Marty referred to this a moment ago, Jeremiah 17, 9 and 10. Somebody read that.
The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind, to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve.
Okay, the heart is what?
Deceitful.
Deceitful. Wow. Okay. Next passage, Matthew 12, 34 and 35. Somebody jump in.
You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him.
Okay. So what comes out of our mouth comes from where? Comes from our heart. All right. Next passage, Matthew 15, 16 through 20. Somebody read that.
Are you still so dull? Jesus asked them. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of the person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what, Dale needs to move over a little bit. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them.
Okay, just the context of this, because it's very interesting in how it contributes to an understanding of the passage. Jesus' disciples were being criticized because they didn't wash their hands before they ate. And I can just imagine Jesus kind of just shaking his head and saying, you guys are so concerned about the wrong things. You're concerned about whether they've got dirty hands or clean hands when they eat. Let me tell you about what's going on inside you. He said, when we see murder or adultery or sexual immorality, a whole list of things here, he says, where does that come from? It's from the heart. And so when we try to help someone who is guilty of any of these sins, and we simply treat the superficial aspect of it, we're not really helping. We're not getting to the root problem. Okay? That's what the Family Roots series is all about on Sunday morning. Okay? We love to treat the symptoms. We love to treat the superficial things because those are sometimes easier to treat than the real problem. And I think that's certainly the case in what Jesus is saying here. All right, Psalm 51, verse 10. Somebody read that.
Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
When did David write these words? In the aftermath of his sin with Bathsheba, he'd been confronted by the prophet Nathan and was in the process of repentance and being restored to God. And he says, create in me a clean heart. Philippians chapter 4, 6 and 7. Somebody read that.
Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus.
Okay. Guarding your hearts. What does he identify as the things that are important to engage in that will guard your heart? Don't worry. Pray. Give him thanks. Engage in these kinds of behaviors which have a protective effect on the heart, dispelling the anxiety, dispelling the fears that sometimes control us. So of the things that we've read tonight, what do we learn about the human heart? What stands out to you? What's most perplexing to you? What is it that these passages are saying is meaningful to you?
Whatever we put in comes out.
All right.
It's right behind the Philippians verse. I thought that's
Go ahead.
I mean, it's
with
talking
that.
about, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent, praiseworthy, think about such.
So that's talking about the filling process. What do you fill in that heart with? Yeah. I had a young dad the other day admit that he said, I was driving. He said, I've had to learn how to be more careful about this. I was driving along and there was this car that was kind of stopped at the stop sign and should have been going, but it wasn't. And I heard my son, who was 4, out of the back seat say, "It's green. That means go." And Dad said, "I wonder where he heard that from." Which was him. Why do I share that? Here's why. His son is already being trained. Okay? And so the things that go into the heart will find their way out. That's why it's so important, as Maureen is so apt to remind us, that's why it's so important to keep our hearts pure and to guard our hearts, because whatever's in our hearts will find its way out. What else stands out to you?
Still, to go along with that, I think when we communicate with people, we need to remember that not everyone has had an experience growing up that have had good people filling their hearts, and they couldn't control that when they were little. And so we need to have grace and mercy with them, trying to understand where they're coming from.
That's so great and so important. And so in order to better understand this person, in order to better listen to them, if I know that, what difference does that make, Jill?
It makes a huge difference, especially with your patience with that person.
Yeah. And so learning again the story, learning what's in their heart from what they've experienced can make us much more sympathetic, compassionate listeners, patient listeners. What else stands out?
Troubling. It's troubling.
What do you mean?
It is so essential to compassion, to so much of what we are, yet it is deceitful.
It's a little troubling. You're right to hear that our hearts are deceitful. I mean, when you hear that, when you hear the human heart is deceitful, what goes on in your own head?
Well, let's just get rid of it.
Let's get rid of the heart. Let's crush it. Let's kill it. Yeah. And some people have been very effective at trying to do that. Okay. It is called hardening, and it's not a healthy thing to do. What did you say? It makes you not trust. So the deceitfulness of the heart tells you that the heart is vulnerable, and you as a person are vulnerable because so much of what we process comes through the heart. What else stands out?
I think it stands out that it's human. It makes us human. Doesn't, I don't think Christ had that issue, but we as humans have this heart issue.
All right. And so the person, look to the left and look to the right and behind you, in front of you. We're all in the same boat about our heart issues. Okay. We're all in the same boat about this. And so understanding it and being sensitive to one another's hearts will be helpful. What else stands out to you? Things we read.
One of the first verses I learned as a kid was to create in me a clean heart, O God. And what always leaped out to me is the word renew. You know, renewal is not a one-time thing, it's a constant thing, it's a constant purification, for lack of a better phrase. So it's not like I fixed it today, so I don't have to worry about it tomorrow.
Very good.
That's not how it is. You know, that's to communicate with anybody else. You constantly, I guess, have to understand yourself and understand how yesterday affected you today and how you need help to work through tomorrow.
Very good. Very good. In fact, the renewal aspect says renew a steadfast spirit within me, David writes. I want to return to what we had before, God. And it's going to take an ongoing renewing process. Okay. Very good. So here's some things I want to highlight about the human heart. Your heart is where you feel deeply. It's the place of passions and dreams, fears and wounds, creativity, and as Ron mentioned earlier, motivation. It's the origin of desires and affection and perceptions and thoughts and reasoning and imagination, conscience, intentions, purpose, will, and faith. And faith. And faith. Okay? There we harbor unconscious thoughts and emotions from anger to joy to gratitude. Someone called the heart the totality of the inner person. And I'm a big fan of John Eldredge and his writings, which are particularly aimed at men. One of my sons has read his most famous book, Wild at Heart. Thank you. At least 3 times through. And he doesn't like to read. Okay. And John Eldredge says emotions are the voice of the heart. So you may say, well, how do I know what's going on in my heart? How can you find out what's going on in your heart? Look at what comes out. Okay.
How you act.
How you act. What you're feeling are all indications of what's going on in your heart. All right. In Proverbs 20, in verse 5, we read, the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. Now, this may be hard in West Texas to picture, but I mean, you've been other places. I grew up in Virginia in a county where all the water in the county originates in the county and runs out other places. So we have rivers and large streams and things. When you see a very rumbly, rapids kind of stream going on, what do you know about that water? It's turbulent, it's dangerous, and it's thank you, shallow. What about when the water is still and placid and just kind of seems like it's just sitting there? What do you know about that spot in the river? It's deep. Okay, it's deep. If there were rocks near the surface, it would be rushing by. This is a deep place in the river. The heart needs the wisdom of God to shape it. But because of the depth of the heart, change can be hard. Change can be hard. It reminds me, and we're going to talk about this on Sunday morning's class. When the rich young man came to Jesus asking about eternal life, and Jesus said, you know, you need to sell all you have, give to the poor, and come follow me, and you'll have life. And what the rich young ruler did? He went away sorrowful because he loved money. That's what the scripture says, because he loved money. Well, the apostles came and they were astonished. They watched all that went on and they were astonished by it. And they said to Jesus, who can be saved? And what did Jesus say? With man or humans, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Changing the human heart may be impossible for us as humans. But it is always possible with God. Okay? And so the depth that's there, we have to cut through layers and defenses. So what should we do with emotions when we're listening? What should we do with emotions when we're listening? You know, you get into conversations with people, you're going to begin to feel some things. What should you do about all that? Okay, there's some dependence on whether it's negative or positive.
Someone mentioned they control, and I think that's kind of where I was, that I don't think you want to be emotionless, but you don't want to have wide swings in it. You don't want to have, you know, unless it's someone's telling you something that's exciting, and yeah, you may want to share it in the excitement. Or if they're telling you something that's sorrowful, you can share the sorrow, but don't overextend either direction, I would think.
Okay, so don't go to extremes. Let me suggest this. First of all, you need to be aware of what you feel. It's good to become an expert at your own heart. What am I feeling and why am I feeling this right now? Okay, you become an expert at your own heart. But don't necessarily trust what you feel. What do we say? The heart is deceitful. Because sometimes what you may be feeling says more about you than it does about the other person. Right? I mean, how many of us have gone and said, well, you made me feel. No, you're talking about what's going on inside of you, not necessarily what's going on inside of the other person. All right? So being aware, being conscious is a helpful thing. Second thing I want to highlight, that we've already touched on some, and that is the heart is deceitful. Here's the passage again. It's not only deceitful, it's beyond cure, he says. Who can understand the heart? You hear Jeremiah saying. And so the truth of the matter is the untrained and unregenerated heart is self-seeking, self-protecting, and wants immediate self-gratification. That is why the human heart is so susceptible to deceiving spirits. Because if a deceiver comes along and offers the human heart what it wants in the moment, guess what? It's easy prey. It's easy prey. That's again why it means, come on in, have a seat. And that's why it's so important to train the heart. And so we come to this passage Jesus said that people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So you can present an image, Jesus is saying. You can look righteous and holy and upright, and everybody respect you, and it be a complete facade. What group of people were kind of known for that? The Pharisees. The Pharisees. And so we're learning a lot about what God values and what he's concerned about. And so in the things that we are learning now, we're learning that God is looking for what's going on, not on the image or outside. God is looking for what's going on the inside. And so how does knowing the heart can be deceitful affect how we listen? How does knowing the heart can be deceitful affect how we listen?
Whether we pay attention.
What do you mean, whether we pay attention?
Well, you can act like you're paying attention or listening and not be listening and be off somewhere else.
Okay, so that deceitfulness can even come out in our ability to listen or our true
Being
listening or not.
distracted with other things easily.
Okay, easily distracted in that way.
In some ways, is it a catch-22 because sometimes your heart can be deceiving what you're hearing, or maybe you're being a little judgy about the words coming out of the other heart?
Yeah, I think the fact that the heart can be deceitful brings us to the realization that sometimes we can have a lack of self-awareness and thus be self-deceived. Okay? And so can the person we're talking to. Next point I want to make tonight about the heart. The heart is the place from which our evil originates. Listen again to what Jesus said in Matthew 15:19. He says, out of your heart come evil thoughts, murder, unfaithfulness, and marriage, vulgar deeds, stealing, telling lies, and insulting others. Interesting thing about the heart, and probably everybody in this has felt this in one way or another. The heart can condemn you when you're innocent. I have told Laurie for years, I don't ever want to take a lie detector test because I just feel guilty taking it, and so it's going to tell that it's going to say that I'm lying, even when I'm telling the truth. Okay, so the heart can condemn you even when you're innocent, but guess what? It can also excuse you when you're guilty. All right. The heart has the ability to rationalize and deny and blame and minimize all these defenses of the heart. We can even convince ourselves to engage in sin and say, God wants me to have this. Right? Isn't that the way the human heart will work? God wants me to have, God wants me to be happy. Okay? How many of you have heard that before? Right? Maybe even said it before. Deceiving yourself. And so here's the bottom line on this. You can't really know your own heart. Unless you let God reveal the truth to you about your heart. In and of yourself, and I've heard people say, I know what's in my own heart. No, you don't. No, you don't. And so it's a revelation that comes from God to be able to listen and learn about our hearts. Peter.
Back a long time ago, preached a lesson. I was on this topic, and I've heard the saying, you know, the road to hell is paved with what?
Good intentions.
And guess what? The road to heaven is paved with good intentions. The heart can go both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so being aware of that will humble us and hopefully make us seek God's guidance more. So I want you to react to this statement by A.W. Tozer, who's from the mid 1900s. He said, the widest thing in the universe is not space. It is the potential capacity of the human heart. Being made in the image of God, it is capable of almost unlimited extension in all directions. And one of the world's greatest tragedies is that we allow our hearts to shrink until there is room in them for little beside ourselves. Ever afraid that you don't have enough love for the people in your life? Well, the reality is, as long as you're getting energized from God, getting energized through the Spirit, your ability to love from the heart is boundless. But sometimes we become conservative about that, thinking that I've kind of got to guard myself. In fact, here's an observation I'm making about the pandemic. Those of you who are sports fans see this most glaringly in the transfer portals in college. And those of us who are Texas Tech fans are a little bit disturbed about that right now, aren't we? Okay? A little disturbed about the transfer portal. What seems to be happening in the midst of the stress and isolation and loneliness of the pandemic is that people have become more self-interested and less loyal to others. You notice that in other places beyond sports? Let me finish. And so the human heart is the ingredient in that brings us to that place. Okay, we have great potential for good in the human heart, but the tragedy, as A.W. Tozer points out, is that sometimes we reduce things down to just loving self. Okay? No.
It's irrelevant now.
Okay, all right. All right, let's go on to the next thing. The heart will determine your course of life. We read that, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. The wise person, as I talked about last week, is supposed to lead us, but it's the heart that often does. I mean, we end up following the heart, even though it's not always a wise thing. But if we have a trained, regenerated heart that's been led by the Spirit, that's okay. But oftentimes what happens is we're following a heart that is not regenerated, that is not being led by the Spirit. All right? And the last thing before we get in is the heart has to be trained. This is particularly relevant for parents. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. I'm going to be talking about this on Sunday in the Family Roots series about discipline. Why is discipline so important for children? For all the reasons we've been talking about tonight. You have to know what you're dealing with. And when you understand what the nature of the human heart is, all of a sudden you understand why discipline is so important. Okay? There's a natural connection that I hope that you can see. George MacDonald said, the secret. Okay, let's answer this question. Then we'll go to George MacDonald. Why is training the heart so important? Through discipline, through teaching. Carol talked about the trials and tribulations. Why is training the heart so important?
Because you determine your eternity.
It will determine your eternity. Amy?
And you're not always gonna want to feel like doing something. it just can't go based on your feelings. You're not gonna have this head of, I'm in the heart, it's gonna deceive, it's gonna deceive you to do what feels good in the moment rather than.
All right, so an untrained heart will not always lead you in the direction you need to be going or be motivated to do the right thing. Yes, Laura.
When I hear the word training, I think about, physical activity or mental awareness or police or whatever, and you train and you train and you train to build. And just when you stop training, you lose it so fast. And so if you don't continuously train, then you're not going to be ready for situations or, whether anything. Training means discipline, continuous work. Even when you're not motivated, you get up and you do it. That's kind of how I feel. That's how I approach it. That's just how my brain works.
Life's going to bring us situations, is it? And they're going to be situations that sometimes shock us, that we aren't particularly prepared for. But if our hearts are trained, we can get through them. If our hearts are untrained, we can make a mess of the situation. Okay? And so here is what George MacDonald said. He said, the secret of your own heart you can never know, but you can know him who knows its secret. So what we want to grow in is knowing God and teaching our hearts the wisdom of God, because an untrained heart is unpredictable and essentially destructive and self-destructive. I'm just telling you the reality. Okay, you can like it or not, but that's the nature of the untrained heart. It is essentially destructive of others and self-destructive. In talking together about wisdom, my son Jared told me once that for a long time he didn't understand some of the things I did. Parents, you ever had this experience with your children as they grow older? So this was when Jared was probably in his early 20s. And he said he accepted what I did because he trusted me, but he said, I'm just now beginning to get it. And I said, well, like what? And he said, like, why we have plenty of money, but you wear the same old clothes. And why you won't get a cell phone. And why you didn't move back to Tennessee when you had the chance. And why you never let Jacob off the hook. And why you keep ministering even when it's exhausting. He now calls me probably at least once a week, and Laurie once a week, to seek our wisdom. That's pretty gratifying. And I told him that it's about properly training the heart, that teaching our hearts to submit its emotions to the Word of God. And one of the key things that we do as parents, one of the key things we do as leaders, is train the hearts of those that we lead. But ours need to be properly trained first. And all of us have junk in our hearts. All of us. All of us have some bad rules. Remember last week I talked about the soul part, the rule part that loves rules. We got all kinds of rules, but some of our rules are bad rules that need to be surrendered to Christ. And so this journey demands humility. When we listen to one another, we need to listen beyond the surface. What's going on in the heart? That's what we want to be listening to. I don't want to just know your words. I can tell by people's tone of voice oftentimes, and you can't do it. Now you'll say, hey, how you doing? Well, I'm doing okay. That didn't sound very convincing, right? So I'm gonna say, that doesn't sound very convincing. Tell me what's going on. You're listening to more than just words. You're listening to the heart. And so questions become a part of being a good listener. Don't make assumptions. Ask questions. And we'll be talking about that in one of the later lessons. But to listen effectively, what is important to know about the heart of the person you are listening to? And before you begin answering that, I want to remind parents, your job as a parent is not simply to control behavior. Your job as a parent is to shape a heart. And those two, the approach to those two things is often very different. I'm not just controlling behavior. Because if I'm just controlling behavior, what's going to happen when I'm not there to control behavior? I want to shape a heart so that whether I'm around or not, this child of mine is responding in appropriate ways. Okay? So, what's your answer? To listen effectively, what's important to know about the heart of the person you're listening to?
Bill, we've heard the saying, be nice to everyone because you don't know what kind of battles they're going through. It just made me think about that when we asked that question, because if the person has a heavy heart, they may be very depressed. If they have an angry heart, they may outwardly be angry, but you don't know what kind of battles they're going through. It's caused their heart to act that way and thus speak that way.
All right, so knowing the battles in their heart can help us be a better listener. What else?
Maybe, especially if it's someone you don't know well, just getting a sense of their emotional state at the time, which you can usually get a picture of that just by the way they're talking, their emotions in their voice, and not reacting to that emotion, but really listening to what they're saying and knowing that it's coming from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, and so again, not listening just for the words, but what's the heart behind the words? What are the emotions that are going on inside of it? A person may be fragile. They may have a heart that's untaught. They may have a heart that's prideful. They may have a heart that is deceiving them. And knowing all this makes us more effective listeners. And so one of the things that's helpful to us is listening and asking questions to let the person, especially as a parent, let the heart of our children learn. Use your wise person to teach the heart of your children. So many of our young adults, and maybe not just young adults, are really struggling with adulting. Okay? I don't know how many times I've heard adulting is hard. Thank you for recognizing what we've been doing for the last 30 years. Okay? Okay? It is hard. And so helping them mature through that. And so one of the things that we can do is ask questions like this. What did you learn from giving your heart in this relationship instead of just building a friendship? I mean, you entered into this relationship and you just gave your heart right away. What did you learn from that? Or a question like this. What did you learn from giving all your finances or spending all your finances instead of saving some of your finances? What did you learn from that? Those are heart training questions. Okay? The heart needs to be trained to grow from those experiences. Another one, what will you do differently next time you have conflict? You know, this situation didn't work out very well in the way you handle conflict. What are you going to do next time? Those are heart training questions. Or something like this. What will you do differently next time that you're angry instead of ramming your hand into the wall and breaking your hand? That's not a good solution to your anger. So what are you going to do next time? That's a heart training question. So when we listen and we're engaged, especially when we're parenting, we need to ask questions that trigger the heart to learn something. Reactions.
It's complicated.
That is complicated.
At my core, I mean, even 4 or 5 years ago, I'm a black and white thinker, you know. It's good or bad, it's right or wrong. And what I've had to learn through parenting the last 4 or 5 years is it's a whole bunch of what the world's going on. And if I don't understand, I'm almost positive the brain damaged children I have don't understand.
Yeah, and they're growing up in an even more confusing world than you grew up in. Yeah. What's standing out to you most tonight? Okay. What's the thing that you're going to leave here tonight and say, that's the nugget that's really valuable to me tonight? What is it for you? Rita?
The scripture we started with is, don't worry, pray. So often, you know, there is somebody, and I have no idea where they're coming from. I can't figure out what's going on. You know, it's like, you know, I'm listening, but I'm also praying because I don't know.
All right. So the value of praying as a listener. Someone else, what's the nugget for you?
Bill, I think one of the things that just comes to my mind over and over tonight is there's 2 songs that we sing. One is the saying, listen to my heart, listen to our hearts. And the other one is our hearts are so unsure. You know, words leading to it, but it talks about our hearts are not good guideposts for us. And both are true. We want God to listen to our heart more than we want people to listen to our hearts. But we cannot let our hearts be our ultimate guidepost. It's got to be a guide for us, but it's not our ultimate guidepost. It's God's word.
God's word, the Spirit, is our ultimate guide, not our hearts. Not our hearts. One more. All right.
Feeding our hearts good nutrition so that what goes in our hearts comes out of our hearts and our mouths and in our lives.
We have to feed our hearts. We have to train our hearts correctly. It is from this understanding of who we are as people, and in particular tonight, understanding our hearts, that we are more effective in understanding how to communicate, how to listen well, how to ask questions, to really understand. So these first 2 lessons kind of laid the groundwork for the practical aspects of listening in the future lessons. So I hope you understand your heart a lot better, Ronnie.
You know, to me, the heart, the soul, and the mind have to work in concert to make everything work. You can have the best heart, but if your mind isn't right, or your soul isn't right, that's going to cause some problems. So
There needs to be integrity, all the heart, mind, soul, and strength working together, a wholeness there for sure. Yeah. So bless you. Go out and listen deeper than the surface. Listen to hearts.